Well, good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to a really cool webinar this morning on elevating your employee experience. My name is Lee McElwain. I'm director of SC Launch Program here at South Carolina Research Authority, and it's our pleasure to bring you an opportunity from one of our top member benefit companies to really take you through some exciting information. Before we do that, let me just remind everybody that this session is being recorded. And if you do have any questions, please type those into the Q&A chat that you have. We'll have an opportunity towards the end of the webinar to actually do some Q&A. So I'll go ahead and jump right into it. Probably rather than in my introducing, let me just tell you a little bit about each one of the panelists that we have. I've had an opportunity to get to know both Megan and Carrie. Carrie is with Hub, and Megan is with Insperity. And so rather than my doing that, they would do a much better job. Let me go ahead and ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into it. Carrie, I'll allow you to go in first.
Thanks, Lee. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Carrie Sherveni. I am the Chief Compliance Officer for Hub in the South region, and I'm also the PEO practice lead nationally at Hub. Insperity is one of our national partners, my favorite. And so we do a ton of work together. My job is really focused on compliance and helping organizations find risk mitigation efforts and techniques and ways to limit risk and exposure and how to deal with non-compliance scenarios should they stumble across one. I also teach at the University of South Carolina College of Law, and I'm adjunct professor there teaching employment law to healthcare professionals.
Nice,
Thank
Carrie.
you. Hi, I'm
Megan?
Megan Fleming. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. I am with Insperity for going on 10 years now, and I'm a certified business performance advisor for them. I cover the state of South Carolina here. And really what we do is just to really help businesses grow, run faster, make more money, but also mitigate that risk like Carrie was talking about and cost contain some of those big ticket line items that hits the ballot there for businesses.
Thanks, Megan. Well, why don't we start, Carrie, I guess with you, with Hub, have you kick it off, and then we'll just keep going from there and then do the Q&A at the end.
Awesome. Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Megan.
Sure.
So guys, today we're going to talk about an incredibly hot topic, which is wage and hour laws under the Department of Labor Fair Labor Standards Act. And the reason we're talking about this today is there have been two pieces of legislation that have passed that have a really significant impact on businesses. And so on the previous slide, you saw all of the kind of word salad around all of the moving parts of wage and hour laws. This is a really complicated body of laws, rules, and regulations, which is why I created this slide, because I think it drives home the point that there's so many moving parts. So let's start with what's happening with the Department of Labor first. And at the Department of Labor, they are entering into what we call work share agreements or memos of understanding with other federal agencies. Here you see an example of the memo of understanding with the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. That's the government agency charged with union oversight and overseeing the enforcement of worker rights with respect to unionization. So the Department of Labor entered into a memo of understanding to say, hey guys, when you come across these things, they matter to us. You should bring us into an investigation. And likewise, you tell us what we should be paying attention to when we have an investigation, and we will bring you along with us. And the Department of Labor has entered into these memos of understanding with all of the federal agencies, with the EEOC, with all of the divisions inside of the DOL, even with the Federal Trade Commission when it comes to non-competes. And so the days of a single agency coming in and investigating a business are kind of over. All these investigators have been cross-trained on EEOC, on NLRB, on FTC. And so a DOL investigator is not only informed and educated, but empowered and encouraged to bring in other government agencies when they're in an investigation and see something that they think may be of interest under another body of regulations or rules enforced by another agency. The other thing that's happening at the Department of Labor today on the next slide is a renewed focus on empowering individuals to self-report. So the DOL has created a timesheet app. When you go to their website, there are pop-ups. It kind of reminds me of when I go to Ann Taylor and I get the pop-up to register my email so I get my 10% off or my free shipping. You can tell what I do in my spare time. DOL's kind of taken a lesson from Ann Taylor, I guess. And there's these pop-ups that say, hey, do you want to file a complaint? Hey, do you want to reach out to us and ask us questions? And so they're really targeting individual employees to self-report. The timesheet app is kind of genius because the employee can put in their hours and their time. It will spit back out the gross wages that they should be paid. And if they want to file a complaint, it's just simply as a single tap and it goes right into the DOL complaint process. If the DOL isn't interested in taking the complaint, it gives them access to the plaintiff's bar in their community so they can call a lawyer. Not me, but a lawyer. Okay. So how do employers get themselves into hot water with the Department of Labor and Employee Relations? On the next slide, I talk to you about exempt versus non-exempt. So said another way, your regular salaried employees and your hourly employees. Non-exempt or hourly employees are entitled to overtime. Exempt means you're exempt from the overtime provisions and you don't have to pay your employees time and a half for anything in excess of usually 40 hours a week. Now, it's not quite as easy as you might think to figure out who is exempt and non-exempt. So let's start with the numbers on the next slide, and then we'll go to the classifications. And I started this section with, there's a lot of things happening and new regulations. This is new regulation number 1. This is like grab your chocolate or later today, maybe some wine, because this is a really big one. Currently, through the end of June, to qualify as an exempt employee, an individual must be paid a minimum of $684 a week. If they make less than $684 a week or $35,000 and change a year, they're non-exempt. Hard stop, no questions asked. Beginning on July 1st, no matter what the job is, if you want to classify a worker as exempt, the first thing you have to meet is the salary threshold. We'll get to the job duties in a minute. But the first thing you have to meet is the salary threshold. That minimum salary threshold jumps a lot to $844 a week or $43,888 a year. So if you've got employees that are otherwise managers, leadership, and you're classifying them as exempt and they don't make $43,888 a year after July 1st, they are not exempt. I don't care what they do. I don't care what their job is. They are not exempt. January 2025, you're reading the slide right, it jumps to $58,656 a year, $1,128 a week. If your exempt employees don't make at least $58,656 a year starting next year, they are not exempt. They are an hourly employee and they must be paid an hourly minimum wage plus overtime. Now, as you can imagine, there is a massive lawsuit filed in Texas. We like lawsuits filed in Texas. Texas is very management friendly. The National Hotel Association, the National Building and Contractors Association, the National Retail Association, the Chamber of Commerce, lots of business groups, excuse me, have gotten together and on May 21st filed a lawsuit to stop this regulation. The last time we tried this, some of you may remember, this is kind of like Groundhog Day. They tried this about 5 years ago, and at the very last minute, the court issued an injunction and stopped the rule. So you need to really pay attention, see if an injunction is issued sometime in the month of June, but you want to stay close to your outside counsel, and you really want to wrap your arms around your employees' compensation today and be ready to make a decision around whether or not people are going to get raises or their status is going to change after July 1st to non-exempt. So let's talk about the difference between non-exempt and exempt so you can wrap your arms around whether or not your people are properly classified. Yeah, next slide. You were right. That was good. Minimum wage doesn't change. So minimum wage in South Carolina is $7.50 an hour. So if your employees are correctly classified as non-exempt, they get paid $7.50 an hour at a minimum, plus a time and a half for every hour worked over 40 hours. How do you calculate the 40 hours? It's the pay week or the pay cycle. You can go to the next slide. So how do you figure out if your people are actually properly classified? This is the big part of this. Remember I said to you before, if your exempt people aren't paid at least that $43,000 or that $58,000, depending on where we are in time, hard stop, they are non-exempt. That's called the salary basis test. Are they paid enough to qualify as exempt so long as their job duties also qualify them as exempt? So let's talk about what the salary test looks like in more detail. The first thing you should know about the salary test, folks, is that compensation amount cannot vary from pay period to pay period. An exempt employee gets paid the same amount regardless of hours worked, regardless of quantity or quality of work each week, every week. And there's a case that came out not long ago in the Supreme Court called Helix Energy Solutions on the next slide. These guys worked out on oil rigs, made more than $200,000 a year. Certainly qualifies as exempt from the salary basis test. But when you work on an oil rig, you work 28 days on, 28 days off. And so the beginning or the end of that period, that 28-day period, was never a full week. So they were cutting the pay for the days that they didn't work in the full week. Well, the Supreme Court said that is not regular, predictable pay. You fail the salary basis test because they're not getting paid the same amount every week, each week. They had to go back. It was a class action lawsuit, pay unpaid overtime, and the successful plaintiff attorney fees. So that was a very expensive lawsuit. The other way that you can destroy the exemption and be subject to overtime rules on the next slide is what we call the duties test. Folks, this is really simple. If the chief janitor is still mopping the floors every day and taking out the trash, that is not the duty of an exempt employee. Said another way, exempt employees usually have authority. They can make decisions, they can vary policy, they can sign paychecks, they can sign contracts, they can hire, they can fire. They work relatively independent and are charged with the authority to help run the business. An administrative assistant who does a lot of typing and printing and filing and all of those things is still an administrative assistant not making decisions. So you really have to pay attention to the duties that your employee performs to be sure that they fall squarely within that of a true manager, true leadership, and they meet that minimum salary. You check both those boxes, the duties test and the salaries test, you're probably fine. If you're not sure, don't play with this, guys. Talk to outside counsel. Here's the other law that passed that we're going to get through quickly, and that is around independent contractors. On the next slide, we talk about this. I know a lot of small business, startup business starts out with a lot of independent contractors. You're not necessarily in a position to take on payroll systems and human resources and offering benefits. And an independent contractor can be a way to seemingly simplify your life. But simply because you call somebody an independent contractor doesn't mean they're actually properly classified. And what makes this area really difficult is that each one of these government agencies has its own standards. Department of Labor has its Internal Revenue Service has its, and the court also has its own standard. And you can literally satisfy one and fail the other. I did an independent contractor review for a client, and they had passed the Department of Labor standard and failed with the Internal Revenue. So this is a complex set of regulations. My feeling, if I were in your shoes, when in doubt, call them an employee and save yourself the money and the heartache, because the leadership of the Department of Labor is moving very close toward the California rule. And in California, it is virtually impossible to have a properly classified independent contractor. California at the state level has all but eliminated that classification. So we're going to go really quickly through each of these agency standards, and I'll give you the nutshell so you have some thinking and talking points. Department of Labor, it's the whole relationship. What do they do for you? How do they do it? Do they have work hours? Do you give them business cards? Do you give them computers? Do they come to an office every day? Do you tell them how to do the job? Can they sign for the company? Can they make decisions for the company? What are the totality of the circumstances? Like, by comparison, that's what I'm trying to say. Do they go out and buy their own computer? Do they pay for their own insurance? Do they set their own work hours? How independent are they? The whole point of independent contractor is that independence. The IRS and the courts have a different test. The courts are more interested, on the next slide, of the substance of the relationship. This is the walks like a duck, talks like a duck rule. I just made that up. But if the individual appears to be like an employee, are you paying them like you do employees? Do they have a regular check that they get in a regular cycle, for example? Or is their pay tied to the work and accomplishing goals and metrics? Is the work that they do part of the business? Do you give them employee benefits? Where do they do the work? So this is very heavily looking at the substance of the day-to-day. And then the IRS test is about agency principles. What kind of control do these people have? On the next slide, I give you more details about the nature of behavioral control, financial control, and structural control. This is your take-home prize. Feel free to take a look at this. Why do I spend time on this? Number one, the Department of Labor just released a whole new standard and new tests. That's the totality of circumstances. So they're really, the DOL is really honed in on this. We got a really aggressive Department of Labor right now. The penalties are huge. So if you go to the next slide, back pay, matching on 401k, interest on investments in 401k, back benefits, interest on the benefits that weren't paid, overtime, attorney's fees, missed work comp benefits, missed unemployment claims. So it gets really expensive. And I don't want you to just take my word for it. So included in our materials are 2 examples from the Department of Labor in particular. And you guys can read this at your leisure, but you can see the headline, $650,000 recovery for 26 drivers who were misclassified. And then if you go to the next slide, 91 workers in California did not receive overtime, 79,000 just in liquidated damages, 158,000 in unpaid wages. So the risks are great. I know that increasing your employee population is the last thing that you want to do when you're a startup and you're a new business and you're building out your EBITDA and all of those things, but the risks are so much greater than the cost of just building this correctly right out of the gate. So I don't come to you just with problems. I'm a solver, and that's why Megan and I get along so well and we work so closely together. Insperity, in my mind, is the big red cape come to the rescue moment. And so I'm going to hand the program off to Megan, who's going to talk about how Insperity can be helpful to your organizations with this risk and so many other things. Megan.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Well, on our next slide, this kind of sums up what we were just talking about. It's one of my favorite quotes from our chairman and CEO, but culture is like the oil in an engine that makes it all run smoothly but effectively. It's where you get that power. If you don't have oil in the engine, everything breaks down, locks up, and you can't move. Ultimately, I think a lot of that is what Carrie was just saying as well. So it's a lot more than just culture a lot of times. that can really get clogged up in those engines. But on the next slide, your life cycle of the business can be at very different stages here. On the left-hand side of the graph here, that's talent. So that's the employee count. So as you grow your employees across the bottom line, then the risk kind of starts growing. And that's truly what Carrie was just hitting on for us. So it doesn't matter if you're all the way over in the left-hand corner of the graph and just getting started, or if you're all the way kind of over to the right-hand side looking at a succession plan and figuring out what your next gig's going to be. At the end of the day, we really can come and meet at any stage of this business, but it just truly shows as you do grow the complexity that does come into play. On the next slide, I'm just going to describe kind of our top 5 things of what a PEO, which stands for a professional employer organization, can do for your business. So number 1, everybody is competing with all the Fortune 500 companies. That's why I just put a quick little snippet of all those businesses there to the right. But at the end of the day, all of these have hundreds, if not thousands of employees, big buying power. They've got a whole 25th floor in their headquarters full of HR department to where each person can manage each one of those type of benefits that, you might want to offer to the employees. So then you can run and operate like that Fortune 500 company. So realistically, we bring to the table the health insurance, 401k retirement plans, if you would like, FSA, HSA, employee assistance programs, and then also life and disability insurances. You can go to the next slide. As you will see, our buying power is tremendous. So we have roughly about 15,000 clients across the country with a little over 300,000 lives in our pool. And so what we were able to do is pool all of our clients together along with our 5,000 corporate employees across the country. And on this graph here, just from economies of scale, you can see the green line. We're just right below kind of the market average for annual increases year over year of medical costs. You will see our spike there in 2012, 2013. We actually adapted to the ACA compliance a few years early. Before 2015 hit. So just in true Insperity style, we adapted earlier. So there was a little bit of a spike, but as you can see, we've stayed below that line now since. On the next slide, number 2, is really relief from payroll and HR admin. As you can imagine, as you are growing these companies, what I like to say is you just kind of grab that low-hanging fruit as you grow to where you need this policy, you need this vendor, you need this payroll company, you need this 401k provider, whatever the case might be. And before you know it, you get halfway down the highway and you look over your right shoulder and you're like, wow, I'm quarterbacking 20 plus vendors and just in the HR arena. And at the end of the day, nobody communicates and it all falls back on you. So ultimately, we once again kind of put our hands around all of that for you, streamline that onto one nice slick platform to where this can all be managed and ran just right there easily for you. The big thing is, whenever payroll is in the house, then it communicates with everything. That's one thing I think in a traditional model, we're just really not used to talking about because you just get a standalone payroll company and then you get the rest of your other vendors. But now once we know what they're working, when they're working, all of that good jazz, you'll see here in just another slide, couple slides over, but that will be able to go real live true time for a lot of those policies for you. On the next one, number 3, is government compliance. Hey, that's everything that Carrie was just talking to us about. So we are that red cape or the easy button, however you want to look at it, hedge of protection from the IRS to all of our clients. So we do actually put up a complete firewall for our clients to where, hey, we're going to make sure that you do stay compliant whenever these new rules and regulations come out, just like we are right now currently with all of our clients talking about the exempt, non-exempt things, hey, A, B, C, D, E, here's kind of some ideas of how we can go about, navigating this. But we will make sure that you stay up to snuff and compliant day in and day out. Number 4 is workers' comp and EPLI insurance. So just like I was stating once, payroll's in the house, then it communicates with everything. It can be pay as you go workers' comp. So you don't have to worry about a workers' comp audit any longer, or that true up that a lot of times can slap you sideways at the end of the year and you're not quite ready for that bill. to where at the end of the day, we are going to have that policy for you ready to go. And heaven forbid, if something does happen on the work site, we then are your advocate and we go fight, do all the different things that needs to be done within workers' comp claims. But then also on the flip side of that, hoping that that doesn't happen, can help put in safety programs with our training and development and all of that, just depending on your style work environment to help with any type of workers' comp claims that could hit. Number 5 is really our claim to fame here at Insperity. There can be a lot of other PEOs within the industry. We are the founders of this industry back in 1986, but as we all know, healthy competition. But within Insperity, we really pride ourselves on just being very high touch. Each segment of our business, and by segments, I mean sizes of companies. So as we all know, you have HR need from 5 employees all the way to 5,000 employees. But at the end of the day, that toolbox might need to change and adjust a little bit as you grow. So ultimately, you have 6 individuals that just become an extension of your team. To where they can help with any type of employee relations or EEOC claims, training and development, reward and recognition programs, or just down to the, things that you have to have, the handbooks, job descriptions, policies, procedures, things like that. So you have a go-to person that ultimately truly is, SHRM certified and has all the accolades that you would need behind there, but you wouldn't have to hire them in as like a full-time employee for you. So just a few stats on the next slide here that I think is really kind of cool and important to announce is, small businesses that use a PEO have an employment growth rate of nearly almost 10% higher than small businesses that don't. Employee turnover rate when companies are using a PEO are about 10 to 14% lower per year. And then the big one that I've always loved is, businesses that use PEOs, approximately 50% are less likely to go out of business from one year to another. So on the circle here to the right, this truly kind of shows everything that we were just talking about in kind of those quick 5 bullet points or 5 things that, ultimately a PEO can do for your business. But as you can see, it is a suite of services here to where you can bundle about everything HR related into one easy button or easy sign-on platform and have it all streamlined for you, allowing for then the cost containment of those medical benefits. And then more importantly, over there to the left-hand side, staying compliant with all of the rules and regulations that seems to be an ever-moving landscape for a lot of companies. On the next slide, you will see, we're pretty industry agnostic. You don't have to be a one-size-fits-all in this type thing. I mean, we go from nonprofits to architects, engineers, textiles, manufacturing, construction, all of the things. I will say in our pools, we do a nice evaluation, though, just to make sure, for risk, that we're not bringing in any high-risk users into the platform. But I think this is a nice piece here because this is one of the first questions that most people ask me is, well, can my style business be in a platform like this? So whenever I saw us dice all this out and truly segment, I was like, wow, we cover about everything that you can imagine, which is really neat. So as you can see, we can be that hedge of protection, helping you with all the compliance and all the scary things I know that even Carrie could bring up on this call, but I think it's really it's great to be informed and educated on all of those type things as the landslide is changing. But ultimately, here at Insperity, we do become your hedge of protection and can help you with all of those type things. Here's my contact information if you have any questions. I also know that you can get to me through SCRA's website as well. But Lee, I'll kick it back over to you and we can open up and answer any questions.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Megan. And thanks so much, Carrie. So I'm looking to see if we have anyone that is done in the chat. I don't see any specific there, but it doesn't mean there might be some questions. So what I encourage, if anyone wants to be able to either ask questions via the chat or if they want to participate by video, if you want to ask questions that way, please just let us know. I have a couple that I'd like to just tee up, and then we'll see how sometimes some people will wait until the very end and something will pop up after we get going. One of the things, Carrie, I'll go back to you that you talked about. What have you seen is probably, say, for technology companies, which largely the audience that we probably have that are listening now, as well as a lot of our client customers, are high-tech, high-growth companies. What are some of the key things legislated that they might need to really pay attention to with those regulations that you mentioned? Anything in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. There's three moving parts that I think are, I mean, they're headline news. They're everywhere. I'm sure everybody's already been reading about them. We talked about the new overtime rules. I think that creates great risk for organizations in your ecosystem. Independent contractors, I see tech companies all the time bring in independent contractors for coding, for tech, for development, for a variety of roles. And you've got to be really, really careful with how much you rely on those independent contractors. You've really got to keep them as independent as possible. You know, they're paying for their equipment, they're setting their own work hours, they're not necessarily integral to the business. You're not paying them like you pay employees. Create milestones, create projects, pay them based on the accomplishment of milestones and projects. Don't give them work comp insurance, don't give them liability insurance. You know, think about it this way with an independent contractor. Would you ever put the vending machine person on your employee benefits or the Coke delivery guy on your work comp? Of course not, right? They're not part of your company. Same here. And then the last one, which isn't in the deck, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it in response to your question, Lee, are the non-compete rules that just came out from the Federal Trade Commission. I know that protecting intellectual property, especially in tech companies, is absolutely paramount to EBITDA, to the value of the business going forward. Those regulations, like the overtime rules, are under significant challenge. There have been lawsuits filed. In fact, the Society for Human Resource Management, which very rarely takes a position, has actually come out strongly opposed to these rules. The school of thought around the legal community is that the FTC didn't really have the power to do this and that they overstepped. We just need that injunction so everybody can figure out the right way to go from here. So right now, everybody's in a big wait and see on the non-compete rules and on the overtime rules. But the new independent contractor rules were not challenged. They actually kind of make sense. They don't cause me great distress, but they do cause me distress for organizations that really rely on the independent contractor classification to avoid the complexities of the employment relationship. And instead, you're just creating a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, those are all great points, because we have a lot of 1099 employees and a lot of the companies that are probably participating in this call. And it's not necessarily a good thing. It may be flexibility, but to your point, they're hidden risks. It sounds like in that process.
Yeah, and I see the question on the owners. So owners are not really independent contractors, they're owner operators. Think about it this way. The IRS is getting their money one way or the other on an owner, right? Because you're still filing K-1s or some kind of partnership filing. You're still paying taxes on the revenue and the money that you receive from the organization. You get into issues with owners with respect to your group health plan because the definition of eligibility on those plans is employee. So what I always recommend to my clients is pay the minimum salary to your owners so that you don't have any question about eligibility for the plan. If you do all of this through Insperity, that really simplifies your life, and have Insperity just send them that minimum salary on a regular basis. And then they can get the eligibility and the access to the Insperity Fortune 500 programs. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, that's a great point. So follow on to when you look at W-2 versus say 1099 with employees, maybe I'll throw it over to Megan. The benefits that where I think everybody understood that W-2 employees has certain benefits. I think some of what you also offer both to W-2 employees and 1099s would be of interest to our listeners.
So we have a couple different platforms. What we were just talking about in our PEO platform, that is for W-2 employees. But we also have a workforce acceleration that can allow to bundle kind of a lot of this together onto one nice platform for you, so you can run those payrolls for W-2s and 1099s, and have our expert HR advice on the backside to help with navigating if this is really the 1099 or if we need to switch them to a W-2. I think that's the big thing, is in both of our solutions, we are very much hands-on with live service teams that can help you really navigate that HR landscape.
Okay. And I would say, to go a step further, you've got the compliance issue that Carrie was talking about, which is so important that we don't want to get in trouble. Talk about how you, Megan, switching to you, how would you use what you offer in Insperity to both on the hiring process to make sure that that a company doesn't make any mistakes, that they understand all the regulations and that Carrie had mentioned?
Yeah. Once again, falling back on that live service team. I mean, ultimately, they can be a part of this whole hiring situation with you, or they can be the phone a friend on the front side to talk through everything before you have that conversation. You know, we don't want to butt ourselves into any conversation. The owners or the HR, VP of HR, whomever is doing the recruiting can handle just fine, but we are going to be your actual resource that can help you navigate all of those different waters, and then also helping to present, you know, what we bring to the table. Because, you know, once somebody is getting excited about coming and working for you, you know, you don't have to be the expert on all the ins and outs of everything that we offer as well. So I think that kind of is a twofold thing, but really just that live service team, having them there at your disposal.
Guys, if you heard me say, you know, 3 times is probably a small amount, but several times in the first part of our program, I kept saying, well, you want to talk to outside counsel, you want to talk to counsel. While Insperity doesn't replace the need for counsel under some scenarios, that general advice and guidance and day-to-day support on, are they exempt, are they non-exempt, how do I build this, what's the right way to go, what are your thoughts? That's where Insperity sits. That is their sweet spot. They can't give you legal advice. I can't give you legal advice. You need a practicing lawyer to do that. But you're not out there trying to figure this out on your own, and you learn the hard way because some inquiring mind knocks on your door. It's such an invaluable resource in such an incredibly active federal government today.
Yeah. I think to echo what you both have said, as I know many of the companies that are online as well as be looking at this once we post it, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is hiring the right talent. It's certainly finding the talent, but then not making a mistake, because I suspect the answer will be where you take advantage of, Gary, as you mentioned, you take advantage of, Megan, of what you have and what Insperity has with the wisdom and having done this for lots of companies is invaluable. If we talk about the downside, so what happens when you end up hiring an employee and then you have to dismiss that employee? How do you help with that as well? Because that's equally important to understand how you do it the right way.
Well, I'll speak up on that just a little bit here. So
Okay.
ultimately, yes, we all understand that, you know, not everybody's going to be a fit forever for a company, or life does move or transition. But, you know, if you do have that disgruntled employee or upset employee, you know, a lot of times our human emotions can take over big time. So I think just having kind of an outside look in on the situation can really be of some value, first and foremost. But then secondly, you know, we make sure that you do handle that properly and document all of that properly. Because heaven forbid, once they do leave and file, you know, an EEOC claim or go get their legal counsel and sue the company, I mean, whatever the case might be and whatever extent they take it, you need to make sure that you are truly buttoned up, zipped up, and, you know, ready to put those boxing gloves on, because that's truly what it becomes. So ultimately, we make sure that all of that is up to snuff. And the nice thing is we go and fight and do a lot of this for you. Yes, you can be right alongside with us, and we encourage you to be. But we also know that can take a lot of time and mediations and all the things that come with a lot of that, to where, you know, we've got the situation and we can really handle that for you. But Carrie, I'll let you add your flavor to it as well.
Yeah.
You know me, Megan, you so get me. You know, guys, when it comes down to it, when you're talking about being put in a defensive position with respect to any employee relations circumstance, whether it's a termination or somebody feels they've been mistreated or treated poorly, or they've been subject to a hostile work environment, it very much comes down to how you navigate yourself through those scenarios and the documentation that you build along the way. And it's not intuitive. This isn't easy stuff. It's not, I had a conversation and we're good, or she understood what I meant and, we've cleared that up. You need witnesses. You don't want to be he said, she said. You need best practices. You need advice and guidance from people who have done this for longer than a minute. And that's really where Insperity comes in. Unfortunately, I made my career on defending employers associated with these kinds of claims and these kinds of issues. And, every case had a different nuance where I would look back and say, God, if they had only done XYZ differently, which is why I'm on the consulting side now, because I didn't like being reactive. I wanted to be proactive. Simple things like complaint procedures and policies, or the policies themselves, the handbooks themselves, training and education for employees. All of these things have to be done with a finesse and a sensitivity to case law, how circumstances can go wrong. And that's where you really need the experience of people like Insperity to come in and hitch their wagon to you and help you through it.
One of the big things I've always liked to say too is, it's like having a child. You don't leave the hospital with a handbook on how to do this. We're all still here, so our parents did just fine. But it is definitely a trial by error type situation. And at the end of the day, business owners, it's the same thing. All of us can go and file for a tax ID number and have a great idea, but the government does not give you a handbook on how to run that and what to do and how to do it.
They just give you all their press releases telling you all the things everybody did wrong and how much it costs them.
That's right. They'll just slide that fine across your desk real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. And I could give you, unfortunately, there are several experiences that we have noted with some of our companies where they've entered into them in good faith with every intention, whether it's a co-founder, it's a partnership, and it just has not worked out. And unraveling that was emotionally difficult for the founders and difficult for the staff, and they didn't have the skill set. Had they had what you're offering, completely different scenario, and it was very difficult.
Lee, you just said something really important. I've been in this space for 20 plus years. I started when I was 5. And I've been defending employers. I've always been management. I've always been management side, attorney, consultant, educator, all of those things. And I've never, well, maybe once, but rarely do I come across employers that are ill-intended. But this is one of the few areas of law that it doesn't matter. In fact, there's an entire concept called disparate impact. And it stands for the proposition that you built a policy or program that was what we call facially neutral. On its face, it didn't discriminate. It didn't single anybody out. There was no intent to discriminate against anybody or to do any harm. But the end result was there was harm, there was discrimination, and that is just as illegal as if you intended to do it out of the gate. And so this is one of the few places where you don't get points for good behavior.
Yeah, well said. And they're, as you say, they are, when people do have, regardless of what the intent is, to your point, the reality is you're breaking up what you thought was going to be your life stream, and there's going to be collateral damage. And if you don't know how to do that, then it just could be a lot of really difficult work. So this is a great example of ways in which we know of people just firsthand. I'm sure you do. They've not done as do we, where had they had this service that you provide, it would have been a very, very different scenario. Much easier to be able to do that. What if I could shift gears just a little bit, just on the benefit side, because one of the things that really challenges a lot of our client and portfolio companies is how do they attract top talent? And they're struggling to get the best and the brightest. trying to look at a 1099 versus a W-2. Can you just walk through the benefits that you offer that really enhance as a competitive advantage for some of our companies?
Sure. So, obviously right out the gate, the medical benefits is normally the first thing that employees are going to start
Right.
asking for. But I know in a small world of just getting started, that you kind of feel like you got one leg on either side of the fence. You're not quite big enough yet for, the broker plan to be written, or you don't have the participation rate here. So at the end of the time, you're just kind of like, I'm stuck, but I'm trying to grow and attract these these people. And they're telling me that they're not going to come unless, you can replace the benefits that more than likely they're going to be leaving. So at the end of the day, we do allow for that. 2 employees is our minimum that has to be on the group medical plan with our solution. So that seems to be fairly low compared to most things else across the country. So that's a nicety. Along with then all those ancillary benefits. I mean, from dental vision to life, AD&D, critical illness, employee assistance program, financial well-being, education assistance. I mean, you name it, to where ultimately whenever you go and, work for the Home Depot or the Lowe's of the world, they turn that paper around whenever you're applying, or even there online now that, dating myself, you don't do that on paper anymore for the most part. But ultimately they're online. It's got a whole laundry list of stuff that, hey, you come work for us and this is all the stuff you get. And, that's all great and fabulous. But whenever you're a small company, that's a lot of time, a lot of hands, just a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get all of those policies up and running, more or less, than renewing and having them all spread out across the year and having to shop them. So ultimately, that's the nice part about with Insperity. You don't have to bring all of it on. We can stage a lot of that and, have different packages. But at the end of the day, you can offer all of that and it be really streamlined there on that platform for you.
And Lee, I want to talk about the opposite side of that and why this is such an amazing opportunity for small business. So Hub is the 5th largest broker in the world. And anybody who understands what we do may be like, what is a broker doing on a program with a PEO when the PEO writes the benefits, but brokers write benefits too? Aren't you guys like frenemies? Don't you compete? And no, we're actually friends. And we're friends professionally and personally, because especially for small business, in today's standalone health insurance world, we can't compete. The reality is that health insurance has become the 2nd most expensive line item on employers' P&L today, second only to payroll. The reality is small group under 50 is going to be rated based on age, demographic, individual information, zip code information, and small group plans are extraordinarily inaccessible and expensive. And so one of the reasons why Hub loves Insperity, one of the many, and the reason that we work so closely with them, is when you can give a small business who's struggling to make ends meet, recruit talent, proof of concept, grow EBITDA, attract that private equity, attract those investors, when you can give them an opportunity to ride on a Fortune 500 plan with 300,000 people on the plan, rated as large group. So now you get out of age band rates, you get out of community rated, with premiums that are competitive at a large group platform rate, which is far less than small group. Now you're cooking with gas. Now you're talking about being competitive. And now you're giving your employees and their families access to care and a work-life experience that you wouldn't be able to provide otherwise. And we get that at Hub. That's why we are so close to Insperity.
I think too, it brings a really nice strategy for the employers, because a lot of times you might as well put a blindfold on and throw a dart on the dartboard of what that renewal will even look like, because that's utilization of the plan. I mean, that's how they come to that number. So whenever you're able to spread that out across that pool, that is then where you can get into a strategy of having, those lower single digit year over year increases, to where that is just a really nice strategy for companies, because otherwise it could be the roller coaster.
I got a call. I got a call from a CEO, and I get really close to a lot of my clients, and this CEO and I had become good friends, and they own and operate a long-term care facility, assisted living facility, and they had about 75 employees. And he calls me one evening and he said, Carrie, I'm done. I'm not offering health insurance anymore. I just got my third 25% renewal. And now there's 75 employees, so they're subject to the Affordable Care Act. They are required by federal law to offer health insurance, right? And he's like, I will pay the penalty. I am done. And I'm like, no, 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 no. There's other ways to do this. Let's talk about this. And we ended up coming up with a strategy that involved PEO. But that's how bad it
That's good.
is that clients call us and they're like, we can't do this anymore. Can I just create a bank account and just give them money? Like, we can't be competitive. So it's tough out there, especially for small to mid-sized business in the group health plan world. And we write those plans, but we recognize that they're just not going to be as competitive as something that Insperity would offer.
It really is a good point. And I'll echo what you're saying, and also what I've been hearing from a lot of our clients is they struggle with not only retaining the talent, but in just getting the right people, keeping them. And it's not their forte. Most of us don't have anywhere close to the years of experience that you have. We're developers, we're architects, we're whatever we have in our subject matter expertise, and we're trying to create a business. And usually HR is not our forte. So this is a incredible opportunity with a great set of partners to be able to offload that stressful regulatory, heavy legislative, and highly competitive part of your business to experts. So, well, I posted in the chat to see if there are any other questions from those that are out there, and so I'll give us an opportunity. I think if we could go probably on for an hour or two, because I have a list of questions, but to be sensitive to everybody's time, any closing remarks that I could ask Megan, if you want to start, and then Carrie, if you want to finish, that you could offer.
No, I just wanted to
Okay.
thank you, Lee, for allowing us to hop on here and do this today, and really look forward to be getting more in the trenches and engaged with all the member companies. Just a little plug out there. We do, with SCRA, have a national agreement now signed. So ultimately, we're able to pass on some really nice, even discounted rates for all SCRA members. So if this is something that does intrigue anybody, would be happy to have a deeper dive and be able to offer you those rates.
Thank you so much, Megan. We appreciate your partnership.
Well,
Carrie?
and Hub is here to help as well. We partner with Insperity, and we also write all the other lines of coverage. So my fellow coworkers will appreciate me reminding you of that. I'm the compliance person in the room. I'm the geek, but if there's other lines of coverage that you need, whether it's business or work comp or whatever, those are things that Hub can do as well. We are so appreciative of the partnership with SCRA and with Insperity, and we're happy to support your organization and the member companies in any way that we can. So thanks for your time and listening to us today.
Not at all. Thank you. It's been an honor to really get a chance to listen to this. I've learned quite a bit, actually, just making notes on the site. So I hope each of you that has had an opportunity to listen in, and those of you that listen in once we've posted on our webcast. And so thank you both very, very much for your time and for your attention. And we'll call it a wrap, and hope everyone will come back for the next one. Thanks again.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Bye.